Hey, Krusty here, with a message from Alice Cooper.
Metal Matt, Alice Cooper here. Good name, by the way. Tell Rob that I talked to you. And the best thing I can say to a guy like Metal Matt is, whatever you do, don't rust.
Hey guys, Metal Matt here, and I got a very special guest on the channel today from the new Alice Cooper album, The Revenge of Alice Cooper. It's the new guitarist GYASI, and I'm really excited to be able to chat with you because this kind of come out of nowhere. I think they've been keeping it under their hat for a long time, and all the Alice Cooper fans are going crazy now because there's a new album with the original Alice Cooper band, including you. You've been invited to join them, and I just want to know, how did that happen? Because that's a really unique opportunity, and you know, it's great to see that it's happening. So yeah, how did that actually happen in the first place?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I was as surprised as anybody. But I think, yeah, Bob Ezrin was looking for someone to fit in with the band with the absence of Glenn Buxton. And I don't think they wanted to go the, studio session musician route like they have, on a lot of previous records. Yeah. I mean, the list of guitar players on Alice's records it's insane. Like Wayne Kramer, Joe Bonamassa. I mean, it's all Steve Hunter, all those. I mean, they're just all the top, top players. It's wild. And I think they wanted someone. I think it. Yeah, it was just surprising to me that they were, looking so outside of those circles. And there's a guy in Nashville named Mike Grimes, and he runs an amazing record store called Grimey's. And he also runs the Basement East in Nashville, which is one of the best venues here. And he's just really plugged into the scene. He's kind of a huge part of the Nashville community and has helped many bands' careers, Cage the Elephant. And he's been, he's just really a great guy and a great part of the Nashville community. And he also knows everybody. Like he sees, every new band that plays. Grimey's usually there. He goes to lots of shows. And Bob, I guess, knew that about him and asked him, if he recommended anyone. And Grimey thought of me, I think, immediately. But he was like, thought of me and probably some other people. And then he said, well, let me ask like two completely unrelated sources. So he asked one of his close friends from back home. And the first person that they suggested was me. And then I think he went and asked somebody totally separate, I think at Third Man Records. And then I was also the first name. So it was sort of the first name that came up from multiple sources. So he sent Bob and Alice some of my music, and they listened to it. And then Bob Ezrin called me. He was like, yeah, put me in touch. So I was on tour in New Orleans, and got a phone call out of the blue, and it's Bob Ezrin.
That's crazy. That's a phone call you want to get.
Yeah. And it was very, it was very much like, let's come in and do a session together. Here's two songs that they sent me. And it was very, let's just see how it goes. It was very loose, no promises were made or anything. I think it was very much like, I don't know, let's see if this works. And so that's kind of how I approached it. It just, obviously I knew what a big deal it was, but also it was kind of like knowing that these guys have been playing together since they were in high school. And I was like, much younger, just coming into this group of like, old friends. I was kind of kept it very open to see, maybe it'll work and maybe it won't. Like, it's all about the musical connection and see if I can fit in and we can have a similar, have a dialogue together, as a band. So, yeah, it kind of went from there. Yeah.
Sounds great. Sounds like the planets aligned for you to get this job.
Yeah.
No, that's crazy. And something I think's great is that they've kind of gave an emerging artist a chance as well, and it doesn't happen that often. I'm on a lot of Alice Cooper Facebook pages and things, and you see a lot of the old grumpy guys sort of saying, "Oh, who's this young guy? Why didn't they get
Sure.
some old guitarist and stuff?" But the thing is, you're the kind of person who's going to be keeping, this music alive for a long time. And if they weren't given their lucky break in the beginning, then they wouldn't be where they are. And I think it's great that Alice and the band are kind of encouraging that, and they've made the right choice because you're young, you got the energy, you're obviously in that kind of similar area. I saw another interview with you, and you're kind of quite similar to Alice in a lot of ways. A lot of the interests are there, and your kind of background and stuff. And I think that's what they need, and
Yeah.
obviously you're filling in basically for Glenn Buxton, who's no longer with us, unfortunately. And that must be quite a hard thing to kind of wrap your head around. How did you approach that with your style and kind of trying to get cover what he's doing as well?
Yeah. I mean, as I said, I kept it I didn't go in trying to, you know, be a Glenn Buxton clone per se, because, no one can replace Glenn Buxton. If they wanted someone that did that, they could have found someone more of an expert in that field than me, because I'm a little bit more like Jimmy Page is kind of my, my god. So I come from the Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck school a little bit more. But in talking to Alice, the Yardbirds were their favorite band in high school. And so I feel like there's a connection there that kind of like helped me make more sense of it, where it's like, I come from a similar school, not necessarily, but I was never like, I never got like obsessed with Alice Cooper when I was young. I would usually get obsessed with bands and then like learn everything. And I loved Alice Cooper, and I always knew all of the, the big hits and everything, but I never studied that music really, so I wasn't a super expert on, their whole vocabulary, going into it. Although interestingly, I was more familiar than I would have been, because I had been kind of randomly in the several months leading up to that phone call. In my van, I only have a cassette player, and I was out looking for cassettes, and I found that this like junk sale, a greatest hits Alice Cooper tape. So I had this one tape that I was just playing over and over in my van all the time.
That's perfect.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Michael was to honor, the spirit of Buxton in, in playing with these guys and fitting in and working together with them and trying to make something together, and coming from, a similar background. But, I wasn't trying to, replicate Glenn per se,
No.
more the spirit of it, the spirit of fitting in with these guys. And that was how I approached it. And, they're all really sweet guys. And once we started playing together, and what another thing that was really interesting is the first song that we did play was a Yardbirds cover. Yeah. So Ain't Done Wrong, which is a great song, some great Jeff Beck playing on that. So that was kind of a really nice way for us to sort of get in a groove and yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I'm kind of like you were, but I was the kind of, Alice was my kind of thing growing up.
Really?
My obsessive band, and Judas Priest, the two of them.
Oh, no. Oh, well, they're on tour right now or soon.
Yeah. That's got to be the coolest gig, because I'm out in Cancun now. It's a bit difficult to get some of these gigs, but I'm going to try and make what I can when things come around. But
yeah,
it's crazy, and I think it's good you kind of. In a way that you weren't like the mega fan growing up and things, because it's kind of more organic. You're kind of putting your own flair on things, and I think with that pressure, it would have been probably
it would have, yeah. I mean, and I did feel some pressure, but I think that really helped in that I was, it wasn't like, I was approaching it more from a musical perspective than from a fan perspective, or from a, it was all about, let's come up with something together, let's fit in. Let's make something that I think is cool and they think is cool, right? If we all think it's cool, then we'll be happy. If we don't, then I'm sure they could find someone, that works. So, and also, and there is also a lot of overlap with Alice in what I do just as a songwriter and performer, because my show is very theatrical, and I think even though my references come a little bit more from the Bowie and some of the British bands like Roxy Music, I think Alice, really kind of paved the way for Bowie and for, I mean, Alice was kind of like the first, I mean, they're a groundbreaking band in terms of theatrics, you know, rock and roll theatrics. I mean, they invent, you know, they are like the source of that music. So, you know, I think when Dennis and Neal, they came and saw my show in Nashville, I think it was actually the first day that we recorded together. After the recording session, they came. I had a show in Nashville, and they came, and I think they kind of understood a little bit more, you know, where I was coming from by seeing my show and seeing the theatrics, and they you know, said that it reminded them a lot of the stuff they were doing in the early days, you know.
Yeah.
You
No,
know.
I checked out quite a few of your things, and it's really good. Yeah, as you got a
Thanks.
classic
Yeah.
sound and your style. You got a really good, like you say, your outfits are fantastic. You know, you got that Bowie
Yeah.
vibe. And
Right.
I heard
Yeah.
Lightning and Sweet Thing. They had a couple of your tracks, and that was really cool. What I come across
Thanks.
there, and yeah, really
Yeah.
cool stuff. And where does that kind of influence come from? How long have you been doing that? And you know, is Bowie your main influence, or you got a few different?
I mean, musically, I think Led Zeppelin is my biggest influence when I was younger. But you know, I've been playing guitar since I was really young. I started when I was 6 years old, and so I've spent, you know, years kind of going into all kinds of different styles and things. But you know, so I have a lot of influences. But I think from a songwriting perspective and a sort of a musical vision perspective, I just think Bowie is just so brilliant in the way he was able to combine these different things. And I think that's I think the reason I like that so much is that I'm into so many different things. So I like taking different things and combining them. You
Yeah.
know, theatrics, the fashion, the makeup, the persona, you know, the lyrics, the you know, because I in college I studied gypsy jazz, like Django Reinhardt. So, you know, trying to bring in some elements of the, you know, jazz music and, you know, cabaret and, you know, kind of all these different things and finding a way. And I feel like glam rock and the way Bowie did it, I think, you know, is really amazing because it's so intellectually stimulating and there's so much, it's so rich. There's so much there aside from obviously, and it fucking rocks too, you know. It's
Like,
like
yeah.
so
That's much like how Bowie did himself. You know, he kind of was a bit of a chameleon. He'd take things from his
yeah.
influences and kind of it become his own unique thing. I think that's quite a cool approach. I'm kind of similar. I do music myself. I sing a songwriter, but I draw a bit from Judas Priest. I draw a bit from Alice Cooper, and then other little things that I like. You know, some psychedelic stuff like gong sometimes, and
Oh, cool.
all this
Yeah.
kind of old school kind of stuff. But when you sort of take little things, it can kind of come together as quite a unique,
Yeah.
because you can do it in so many different ways, you know, depending what you're taking and
Yeah.
getting influence from. It can really come out as a unique sound, and your stuff really demonstrates that. You know, I haven't heard much like that. I can see why the band noticed you and kind of wanted you on the album because it's it's really cool. Um,
Thanks.
what was it like getting in the studio with Alice? Obviously, Black Mamba's dropped now, which is a great song. You know, any stories about that or working with the band? You know, how was that actually being in the studio with them?
It was great. It was really cool to, you know, when we would set up kind of in a circle, you know. So it was like I was kind of right across from Dennis, next to Neal, and then Alice would be over here. Um, and those sessions, Michael Bruce wasn't at the Nashville sessions because he couldn't fly in, so it was just the four of us.
Oh,
Um, and yeah, it was really, you know, it was just a band in a room, you know.
yeah,
Um, and you know, we did it live and all the basic tracks and everything. It was pretty surreal, you know, to be sitting across from Dennis and like watching him, you know, like come up with parts and you know, try different things. And his bass playing, I love his bass playing. It's so great, it's so
yeah,
iconic.
yeah.
It's like it's the real thing.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, that was great. And then, you know, a lot of that, those were sort of some of the basic sessions, but I didn't play on the basics for the whole record. So there were a lot of other sessions that happened where it was just me and Bob Ezrin. Bob Ezrin would fly to town from Toronto, and we would get in a studio and you know, kind of go through, you know, these songs that already had basic tracks and work, you know. So most of this record, my closest work was done with Bob Ezrin, kind of one on one, just the
mm.
two of us.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. And I mean, he's a huge part of that band. You know,
Mm.
Bob is you know, at least 50% Alice Cooper, or if not more. I mean, he's so he's brilliant. He's just the way his mind works. He's just has Just a great, I mean, he's a producer. He's got the producer mind, so he's able to kind of take account for every detail and the big picture at the same time. So yeah, that was really fun. And we did a lot of sessions like that where, and it was very collaborative, and it was, sometimes it was free reign to do whatever I wanted, and other times like Bob had a really specific thing that he wanted, and we would, it was very collaborative, and we would like both give input until we both arrived at something that we liked.
Yeah,
And that
that's
was kind of
great.
how it went. Yeah.
And like a band should be really, doesn't really matter if it's the Alice Cooper band or any band, you've kind of got to go through that same kind of
Yeah, it's
just
the same
jamming out.
process. Yeah,
Mm.
same. I mean, same way I do my records,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
was the Black Mamba, anything you can tell us about that? And anything you
that
remember?
that was that was the first after we did the live sessions in Nashville. I think that was the first like song that I got that, had already been recorded the basic tracks and I had to do the guitars on.
Mm.
I remember we had like pretty sure that one we had a Marshall stack and then another amp like stereo. So I remember like when we were tracking like the sound, it was like this huge guitar sound. That was really awesome. Um, but that one, when I got it, it didn't have Robbie Krieger on it,
Oh,
and I don't think there was any solo on it. I think it was kind of just all the riffs and so yeah. But I think that one. I think we did it pretty quick and did
mm.
all the riffs and stuff, and then I didn't until it came out. I didn't know that Bob was gonna, oh, we need some psychedelic guitar. Who could we call? I know, yeah, Robbie Krieger. It's like the
Yeah, yeah.
access. Yeah, it's just amazing. So that was really cool to see that, and have be on a track with Robbie Krieger. It's
Oh,
awesome.
yeah. I guess and maybe there was a few pop-up special guests there on the album. I don't know. I've heard different things, but I'm guessing.
Yeah, I don't honestly know. Aside from, I know, yeah, Robbie, and then the guy who had done some of the early sessions with them was a guy named Rick Tedesco, and I think he has Glenn Buxton's guitar. I think he's the one who salvaged his old SG and brought it back to life. And so yeah, there was at least one song where he had done like a solo on something, and Bob and I were just like, I was like, that solo is perfect. Like I can, if I play this, I'm going to play the exact same thing. I can't top this solo. So there was some of the stuff that he's on, a few songs. But as far as I know, that's the rest is yeah. It's just Michael Bruce and me and Rick and Robbie.
Wow, that is cool. And I think that's
Yeah,
what fans want. They want to hear that kind of classic sound, and it's great
yeah.
that you're able to help bring that. And was there any kind of any difficulties in the studio? Anything you remember you were kind of struggled with and had to overcome?
Uh, I mean, I think Bob Ezrin can be intense. When the red light's on.
That's
So
true.
there, but it was never. It was just but we were riding the same intensity together. Where it was like and I mean I improvise all my solos, so I would go in with a blank slate, and then it would be like okay, guitar solo time, and just hit record, and then it's just completely improvising. So you're in the hot seat for those moments. But that's part of what that's how rock and roll is made. You do it. The tape's
Yeah.
rolling and you lay it down, and so I partially enjoy that way of working. So no, I mean I don't. Yeah, I think there was never anything that we were like beating our heads against the wall or anything.
No, it was all quite
Um,
natural and things. Yeah. And
yeah,
your solos, do you have a favorite solo you played on the album? And
I honestly haven't listened to it in a
uh,
while. I've only heard I like final mixes because it's been a while. We've been having to keep a tight lip on this for almost 2 years.
well,
Yeah, since I got the first call. So I did my last session was like last August. So it's been a while. And also, when you do a bunch of solos, it's like I don't know which one they're gonna pick. Sometimes we'll have like three options.
yeah,
So it's up to Bob. So so yeah, until I listen to the whole record, I know Wild Ones I think has some nice guitar work on it.
mm,
But there were several really cool. There's one song. I mean, one thing that I think really makes this record like OG Alice Cooper group is that there's almost like a show tune on it, like a jazz number, which is like Blue Turk on some of their early
Yeah.
records where you just have this total left field song,
Yeah.
which is such an Alice Cooper group thing, and this record has one like that. And that has, I mean, I'm doing like kind of a Django Reinhardt sort of solo on that. It's like total departure. So
That's awesome.
yeah, I think there's some really
That is really cool.
yeah.
And so overall, with the sound of the album, is it going to be pretty much what people expect, like the original band sound? Is there anything
It's
new sounding on there, one track
I mean,
or anything?
yeah, there is. I mean, there is some modern. There's definitely more modern production on it, on the record. But to me, it's more like Killer, like early Alice Cooper group. Is I think the overall like energy of the record is like it's the foundational, like how they started is kind of the overall energy. I mean, there's new songs and new a more modern sound, but that I feel like is the overall vibe of this record.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
definitely noticed that Killer's
yeah,
kind of a vibe on
yeah,
Black Mamba. It's really neat.
yeah.
Yeah. And with the equipment and stuff that you use on your guitar, did you have to change any of that for this album from what you use for your own music? Was there anything?
Not a whole lot. Except I did. I was in some studios where I would, had a sort of more of a palette of things to choose from. I wish I had a three pickup SG, but didn't have one of those. But I did use an SG quite a bit. I have a Les Paul. I have a RO.
Oh, that is sweet.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful
Wow,
RO.
very nice.
1960 Les Paul. That's my main guitar, and so that's
Sweet.
probably the main guitar on the record. But a lot of it was tuned down to E flat, so this guitar doesn't like E flat that much. So for those songs, I think I used a Firebird for a few, ES 335, and mostly all Marshall, like
Right.
Marshall Plexi, for most of the record. A little Fender Bassman in there, but yeah,
Very
yeah,
classic then, yeah, very classic.
very classic. Yeah, yeah.
That's nice, yeah. And do you think how did you find Alice to work with personally? Was he quite intense in the studio, or was he
Yeah.
focused on
Very focused. He's a really sweet guy, really nice. The first day that we recorded, the first hour of the whole session when I got to the studio, I basically just sat with Alice and talked on the couch for like an hour, just about. I mean, I had so many questions, and so there's so much. I mean, yeah, he's just the experiences that they've lived. It's like the stories, and so I had so many things I wanted to pick his brain about, and yeah, he was just a really sweet guy, total gentleman, and I mean, the amount of stamina that he has is just unbelievable. At his age, I mean, because he had been on tour, they came off tour, we were doing these sessions, and then that night, Alice had rehearsals for an upcoming like 3-month tour that was about to start. So we're in the studio, and then Alice is like going to rehearsal every night for that. It was like, yeah, pretty inspiring, just like how he just does not stop. It's wild. um but yeah, I thought he was great to work with.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
the rock star.
Exactly.
Total rock star.
He
Yeah,
is the kind of definition, really. He's
yeah,
always been the coolest kind of guy, and like you say, so many stories to tell. He's the one guy I've always dreamed of meeting. I've met most of my rock
really.
heroes, but yeah, it's just someone
Yeah,
I've always hoped one day it happen. I think it will one day. Maybe I'll get him on for an interview or something sometime.
yeah.
It'd be good to chat with him about this album, and yeah, it's just he's got such a kind of charisma, hasn't he? He's
Hmm.
on stage and off stage. He seems very interesting and kind of many
Very.
stories to tell. Is there anything you kind of learned from him that will stick with you? Any advice he gave you or anything like that, which sticks in your mind?
mm, hmm. Nothing in particular advice wise. I think just the experience
Exactly.
enough, the experience and you know, getting to talk about, his experience, just at that time, I mean, they lived it at the right time. I mean, I think the stuff with Dali, Salvador Dali and
Yeah.
Groucho Marx that he was friends with, these like completely legendary, iconic characters that he got to meet. Um, but I think seeing Alice's discipline and work schedule, at his age and, his drive to continue creating new things, but also, you know, you know, making a new show. I mean, he was working on a brand new theatrical show for that tour, and he had just done one and he was like creating a new show, rehearsing like, brand new stage props and all this stuff, making a new record. And, so I think that was the most inspiring thing to me, was just like, wow, like that's how you do it. Like that's
Yeah.
how you do it. You make it happen. And him and Bob were actually, what was really a cool moment was we had some off time uh, at the studio, like break time, and Bob and Alice were sitting across from each other. Bob had an acoustic guitar, and they were writing lyrics and working on, like, I guess what will be probably the next Alice Cooper solo record, I think, or unless it could have been something on this record, but I think it was something else. They were already like writing new songs, so that was probably the most
Wow.
inspiring part for me.
Yeah, he's definitely a man with a vision, and I think he's, sometimes that's how these kind of really artistic people work. You kind of can't really shut off. You just one
Yeah,
thing after another. Your mind's kind of whirling ahead of so many different ideas. I guess he's materializing it as it kind of comes to mind by the sounds of it. That's really
yeah.
fun. I can imagine the experience itself must have just been something, inspiring for you, and hopefully within your solo work too, you'll be able to carry some of that with you. You might
Yeah.
on a pretty heavy workload if you get into
Yeah.
much of
I
this
mean,
kind
I'm about to go on tour next week, but I'm working on my next record
of,
right now. Yeah.
wow. Tell me a bit about that. What's that kind of, what do people expect from that kind of thing?
Well, it's a little early to tell, but I'm doing it. I just put out a record in February. And that was kind of very much with my touring band. And this record so far, I've been playing a lot of the instruments myself, like even playing drums on some stuff. So
Yeah,
that's been a slightly different approach, which, yields its own results. But so far it's a pretty driving rock record so far. Like
awesome.
a lot of yeah, kind of garagey maybe, like in the guitar riffs.
Yeah,
But yeah, but I don't know. We're about 6 songs in, so it still leaves time for it to develop.
yeah,
So
definitely. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It takes time, these things. I think a lot of people don't realize how long sometimes an album just things can take.
album can take a while. Yeah, so I'm trying to get faster at it, because I
Yeah,
want to, I think if you look back in the day, I mean, these bands were putting out at least a record a year, if not more.
yeah,
And yeah, these days it's like that seems challenge it's challenging
it
to do
does.
that.
It
But
does.
that's my goal, definitely, to have. I think this record, the goal is to put it out like next spring, March
Awesome.
or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that is sweet. I know what you mean with the, like, back in the day. I see bands like Judas Priest, and they had not only an album out pretty much every year, but an iconic album. When you look at it now,
Right. Yeah.
how do
Yeah.
they do that? Like Screaming for
Yeah.
Deliverance, Defenders of the Faith, and it just went on and on with like iconic stuff. And I think Alice was the same. A lot of these bands,
Yeah.
it must have been a pretty magical period back then, where somehow they were able to just you know,
Yeah.
and get on with it and create some great stuff. I think, like you say, times have changed a bit. It's things have kind of slowed down a bit. Maybe that's
Yeah.
a good thing, but there was certainly an art to back in the day. Maybe that approach needs to come back, and I guess it might have been
Yeah.
a bit more less thought went into it. They just went with what they felt and
Yeah.
got
Go
it
with it.
down. And I think that's often the way. The question that's on everyone's lips: will there be a tour to go with this with the original band, of course,
Yeah.
with this album?
That is the question on everyone's lips.
It-
Including all of us, really. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I can't say. I know, you know, I know I think the band wants to tour, or at least I think they definitely want to play.
Mm.
And I think, there are logistical things involved, I think, that just have to be, dealt with. Um, these they're not they haven't been touring like Alice has, over the years. So I don't know if it'll be as much of like a hardcore,
Mm.
like full out tour. But I think there's rumors of like doing some special shows. So hopefully there'll at least be that where it'll be kind of some of the key cities, New York, LA, Detroit, Paris, London, something like that. But Alice's schedule, right now, if you look at Alice's schedule, he's on the road pretty much till I think next spring almost
Yeah, yeah.
with his band. So, I guess it will be it. Yeah, I doubt it will be soon like this fall or anything. It'd probably be I guess next year. So maybe I think they also maybe are kind of looking to see how well the record sells, and I mean I know demand. I mean I know the fans want to see them, and also from my perspective, I want to see them get together and play,
Mm.
and I think them coming together and doing this record, it's like me as a fan, it's like why not? Like if you're gonna get together and do a record together, play some shows together while you can. So I hope that they will, I hope that they will.
Yeah,
So, and I'll be there to support them if they are.
yeah, yeah. Well, I
So,
hope you, if they do, I hope you'll be on the road with them, and
yeah, I,
yeah.
if they tour with this record, I will be on the road with them. But
Awesome,
yeah,
awesome. Yeah, I hope to see it 'cause it's quite new. It's Alice has been doing his thing with his current band, which he's been going with for quite a long time now. Sometimes they switch guitars here and there, but
right.
a pretty solid,
Hmm.
structure, and they are a strong force to
Oh yeah, they're great.
deal with. So they're
Great.
fantastic. But I think it's
Yeah,
great to see him do something else, and original
yeah,
for a while. And yeah, if they can just do a few select tour dates, that'd be fantastic. And I think it'd be the next Oasis reunion thing where all the tickets. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I eagerly await that. I'm hoping I'll be able to make one of the shows if it does happen, and yeah, it'll be really cool. So yeah, tell me a bit about your songwriting process yourself when you're writing songs. Do you have certain subjects you kind of approach with your songwriting, or how do you put your thoughts to paper, kind of thing? How do you work?
Yeah, I have different ways of doing it. I guess a lot of times it's riff based, or guitar is usually the first thing for me. Um, and so yeah, it's that's usually sort of how I'll build something is and then find hooks, find melodic hooks, and then yeah, usually for me lyrics are kind of the last puzzle piece to kind of get the right lyric that fits this
Cool.
the musical energy that I've kind of already created.
Hmm.
But I also sometimes, will just sort of free write poetry and write things in notebooks to sort of either draw from or, have kind of a running list of ideas. So it's kind of, sort of synthesize, trying to have all that stuff kind of working. And then hopefully when you start, really creating and sitting down, you can find those puzzle pieces and kind of put it all together. But sometimes I write, on acoustic guitar and do it that way, very singer-songwriter way as well. And for this last record, I wrote some on piano as well.
Yeah.
So, I like to try, I think doing it different ways is part of how I do it. And, it keeps me inspired because it feels fresh when I'm approaching it from another direction.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
that's really cool. I kind of songwriting myself is quite similar. It's kind of one of those things. I think there's no real set way of doing it. Sometimes it just springs to mind some idea, and you got to run with it. And yeah, like you say, I think many people will relate to that if they are songwriters. It's kind of one of those things. Sometimes it's a melody, sometimes it's a phrase that might come to your mind for a chorus or something, a good saying
Yeah.
or something.
Right.
I find with songwriting sometimes one of the secrets, I guess, which I think works, is like a well-known expression or something, a saying that's kind of well heard or well known. If you can get that somewhere into the song, like a hooky kind of phrase, don't let the cat your tongue, or whatever the phrase might be, some
Yeah.
like well-known thing.
Oh yeah.
For some reason, that seems to work. And little things. It's funny what can help you write a song. It can come from very very strange places. Sometimes you'll be just sat somewhere,
Totally.
a thought will come, and yeah, I think it's one of the best parts of writing making music. It's the songwriting
Yeah.
element is
Yeah.
quite
It's
interesting.
it is, and it's very mysterious, It's one of those things that's yeah, there can be, a very sort of magic sort of like where did that come from,
Yeah, yeah,
It's there's still like mystery in it, like very perceptible mystery to it sometimes. So I think that's very exciting
yeah, yeah,
about it. But yeah, books too, language books,
exactly.
overheard conversations. I mean, it's everywhere. It's yeah.
Yeah, I think
Um,
people who aren't musicians wouldn't really understand the weirdness of how some of these songs come about. And we're listening, like you said,
oh
listening to
yeah, oh
conversations,
yeah,
and, anything you might hear, and people would be surprised what might end up in a song that's from their life or something you've heard someone
oh
say.
yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a strange thing. Yeah, I was speaking with Doug Aldrich the other day. I had an interview with him, and he was saying the same about the organicness as well of kind of sometimes you've just got to go with that initial thought and something that's there that sometimes that's the magic, like you say, it's
Right.
quite magical. You don't know where it comes from, and that first thing might resonate more with people than a really contrived idea that you're kind of overthinking, so yeah, it's an interesting side of things. Did you with Alice, did you see him doing much of the songwriting? You said with Bob he was
Only that one time with Bob where they were
really.
sitting down and Bob was playing guitar and then Alice, they had a piece of paper and they were kind of working out, yeah, some lyrics and melodies over those chords. That was the only time I got to see, real songwriting happening with this record because most of the songs when I was brought in, most of it were mostly written, you know. I
Really?
think, I did there were some lyrical changes like from the initial tracks I got to like now there were like some of the titles even changed a little bit, but most of they had done most of that work before I was
Yeah.
brought in.
Oh,
um
nice.
so yeah, so
And
I was
do you know if they had other kind of lyricists on the album? Anyone kind of they brought in, or was it more just
I it to me it sounds like Alice. Oh well, no, it was I think it was the whole band.
no man,
'Cause
nice.
I know Dennis brought some songs in and Neal brought some songs in, and then which is exactly how they used to do it. They would bring in songs and then basically Alice takes it and sort of, I think often they would bring in sort of a loose lyrical concept and like some melodies and stuff, and then Alice would, finish out all the lyrics and turn it into out,
That's
kind of
what I was thinking.
take a skeleton and then turn it into Alice Cooper,
Hmm.
so I think that's exactly how they, did all those early records.
Yeah,
So in that sense, it was very much like that's what makes this sound like classic Alice Cooper group is that they all wrote it, I think, together, and Bob. So it's the same crew, same team doing it the same way.
so talking of the Revenge of Alice Cooper, the new album, do you have a personal favorite song on there?
Um, Wild Ones, I remember really liking musically that one. It just has some really cool sections. Blood on the Sun is another song it's kind of got this whole kind of middle section that really like some of the songwriting, some of Alice's songwriting and Bob's, production. Like I love it when they take these, really interesting left turns. Which I mean, if you look at like School's Out, like that whole middle section, it's such a weird song. If you look at it, if you really analyze the songwriting, it's like, wow, who came up with that whole middle section and the way it moves is really really interesting and creative, and there's several songs on this record that have those kind of moments where it just kind of like, oh wow, I don't think I would have done that, but it's really cool. um
Yeah,
I would have not I wouldn't have thought to take it there. I'm gonna actually bring up the track list.
cool. Yeah,
uh just um yeah, Blood on the Sun. um let's see. Yeah, Wild Sun and Blood. I think those were my two favorites. Um, what Happened to You is another good one. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of just great rock and roll tunes in here. yeah, Crapped I Guess in the Way of Your Dreams has a really Kinks kind of riff.
Yeah, yeah.
Very like, yeah, very straight up like early rock and roll riff stuff. Um, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I'm not gonna. There's a lot of good ones on
Yeah,
here.
that'll do. Yeah, no, that sounds good. And did you find was it weird for the guys getting all together in a room again, kind of as a fly on the wall, watching them all kind of together again? Was it or was it just
Man, it
back to the
seemed
old
very. I mean, they're brothers. Like, they're no, they were totally in sync, and you could tell they'd been playing together since high school. So it was very, they were joking around, and you know, yeah, it was really fun to just kind of be hanging around with them, and them, swapping stories to like, I remember this, and telling these wild tales, and also I think they were, it wasn't like Alice and the band. It was like they were a band, so everyone had their own, like, the input, there was no boss. Like, everyone, they all respected each other equally and had equal input on everything. Um, and yeah, no, it was very, they were very, very close, and, yeah, really nice. And, joking around, and sort of, you could tell they were just, a bunch of old friends that hadn't seen each other in a while. So,
Yeah,
you know,
that's exactly what people want to hear, I think.
yeah,
I'm sure that energy kind of got in the album as well,
totally. Yeah, it was funny. We took a lunch break, and we walked next door to the studio to this like little sandwich shop, and it was like, I don't know if there's anybody in there. But we were standing in line, and the guy behind the counter, I guess he didn't recognize Alice, but he was looking at all. He was like looking at. He's like, he looked at me. He was like, "Man, y'all look famous as hell." It's like I don't know who this is, but they're definitely rock stars. Like, you could just, all of them together. So I was
Yeah,
like, yeah, if you only knew.
that's
They're
yeah,
like,
yeah.
some of us are famous as hell. Maybe not. I was definitely the least famous one in the group,
You will be,
but
you will
that
be.
was a very funny moment where it's like, I don't know who these guys are, but they're, rock royalty. You could just tell.
That's great, yeah.
Yeah,
If someone like him who didn't know, could sense the vibe, that tells
yeah,
you you need to know about those guys, and you as well, you've all got that rock star vibe about you. But yeah, that is a funny story. I can imagine, he would have been getting Alice to sign everything if he'd
right. If he'd
knew
known who
who
it
he
was, yeah. But he was
was.
like, man,
Selfies going on. Sometimes,
y'all look famous as hell.
yeah, I'm sure they wait for those moments where they're not recognized, and then it's probably quite a nice change sometimes to not be recognized exactly for
Right,
who you are. You can kind of go about your business, and
right.
I'm sure they
Yeah.
appreciate that. But yeah, no, that's really cool.
Another similar story was Shep and Alice and Bob invited me out to dinner, um, one of the nights when we were recording, and my wife and I pulled up to valet to this restaurant, and the valet was like, "Man, like, don't freak out, but Alice Cooper is in there sitting at a table." And I was like, "Oh, I know. I'm gonna go sit with you." That was kind of that was a moment where he was recognized, and I was, I got to be like, "Oh yeah, oh, I know.
Yeah.
That's the table I'm gonna go sit at." Yeah,
That's crazy. That is funny. Yeah, I
which
know.
was funny.
I haven't had many
But
of those moments, but I had a funny one with a KK Down and a Judas Priest. When I went to a Bloodstock, he invited me because I interviewed him years ago, and we kind of stayed friends since then. He got me to take some photos from somewhere in Bristol where I was living. I went to a printer to get all these photos for him to sign at the Bloodstock festival, and I turned up at the festival with these photos, and I was talking with like the security outside. He was going to do a sign-in later on in the day, and I was saying to the woman outside, I said, "Oh, I've got these photos for KK," and she couldn't get it in her head. I was saying, "Oh." I said, "No, they're full KK," and she was saying, "No, you can only get one signed." And she kept saying, "No, he's only signing one."
right,
And I was
yeah,
like, "No, they're full KK, they're full KK." And it took me ages, but and this
yeah,
other guy come over, and he was unsure. He was looking at me like, "Does he know KK?" And then they like walked me backstage,
sure,
and KK was there, and it was like, and they were waiting to see if he actually reacted like he knew me. It's kind of
right,
funny
yeah,
situation. But yeah, this is pretty rare. Those things happen, but it's a nice thing when you've been invited along to something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, it was nice. It was nice. It
Yeah.
was just, yeah, funny.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And
yeah,
I was going to say with Alice in obviously Alice has done so much stuff since those early days. His sound has kind of evolved. He's done metal pretty much with Dragon's Down and Brutal Planet, some of the
yeah,
Kenny Roberts stuff, very heavy.
right.
Was there any moments in the studio where the band were having to tell Alice, approach this differently, to get it back to that old school vibe? Was there any moments where it was like Alice was stuck in his newer sort of sound, maybe, or anything?
Not that I wasn't, not that I was part of, you know.
Mm.
And I think maybe that's part of the reason I was brought in to, because my playing style is just, you know, I don't really have that vocabulary, that more modern vocabulary, you know. It sounds pretty old school, whatever
Yeah.
I'm playing. And there is, I think, one song on the record that I'm not playing on that has that kind of is the one thing where the guitar kind of goes a little bit more into that more modern metal territory a little bit.
Mm.
I think that's Rick on that song. I'm not totally sure. Um, but no, I mean, yeah, I was not around for any of that, you know. I mean, there are some, you know, yeah, this is definitely like a hard rock record for sure, but not much of it pushes into that category, I think, because of the nature of, you know, those guys knowing what they sound like, you know,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and you know, understanding what they're doing, and so so
Yeah.
yeah,
So it all just fell into place like it used to, kind of thing.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, no, that's sweet. And with your own band for your own music, who are the guys in your band? What tell me a bit about them and how you got together and how did that come about?
Yeah, so my band is, it's not a totally set group. It kind of goes through, you know, depending on how much touring we have, it'll sort of be, you know, different configurations depending on who's available, because um my other guitar players all play with other people. Ricky Dover Jr., he's kind of my first call main guy. We've been playing together for years, but he plays with Grace Potter and the Nocturnals now. Grace
Oh,
Potter. So yeah, he's her guitarist, her lead guitarist now. So you know, it's always just, you know, whenever I get dates, I'll send them to him, and he'll check with her. And so, you know, whatever lines up, he'll come on. And, you know, sometimes we do tours where we're just a three piece and I play all the guitar.
wow.
Um, and so that's kind of a different show. It kind of gives us two different shows, because it's like one where it's like very much about me and the guitar playing. And then the show where we have another guitar player, there's quite a few songs that I don't play guitar on. So it's much more of the front man theatrical thing where I can, you know, get more in the audience's face and do all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of, you know, those are sort of two different shows that we kind of balance and go between. And Cole, my bass player who plays bass and keys, he's been with me the longest, probably since like 2018 when I first put out my first EP. But it kind of, you know, it sort of just evolved. That's, you know, that's a big reason I moved to Nashville, was to just be around lots of musicians and be part of that scene. So when I, you know, put out my first records, I basically, you know, made my first record in EP, produced it myself, recorded a lot, most of the instruments myself, and just had it in hand, came to Nashville and started booking shows. And then it'd be like, then I could get a band. You know, it was like, I have all these songs and I have a show this date. Can you play bass? And so I would, you know, and that's how, when I had those things, I could get a band together. Whereas if I was just like, hey man, let's get together and jam, it was just really hard to get anyone to commit to anything, you know, because everyone's busy. So it kind of just evolved from that, you know, booking more and more shows, and I had a residency in town for like a year, playing every Saturday night at this club, which is where Dennis and Neal came and saw us. And so that was, you know, that was kind of a core group, three of us, me, Cole, and Sam on drums, and we did that for like a year, and that really kind of made us, you know, having a gig every Saturday night for a year, you know, turns you into a band.
Yeah,
You know, so that was really helpful for us because it just tightened up all the loose ends.
yeah,
Um, and so, yeah, so for these upcoming shows, it's me and Cole, and we have a different guy, Johnny, on drums for these runs, who's great. He's a young guy. He's 22,
yeah.
lives in Atlanta. He's killer.
Perfect.
He came into, yeah, we had a rehearsal with him, and he, you know, learned like 20 some songs and basically hardly had to, you know, run them twice, you know? So,
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah, so they're great musicians, and you know, the songs evolve. My songs evolve a lot from you know, the recordings to live, because you know, I think all of my Led Zeppelin influence and Jimmy Page influence really gets to kind of stretch out more in a live setting, which, because if you look at Led Zeppelin, they were such an improvisational band. I mean, that was kind of like core of their ethos is never the same. They were always evolving every song. And so I really like kind of taking, without going into becoming a jam band or anything, but like taking the structure of the songs and then finding, okay, between this section and this section, like anything can happen here. And then each night trying to surprise the musicians and, teach them like, let's go some, like, don't be afraid to like take it here, and pushing the dynamic. So that's really a fun thing for me, and something I really enjoy is, pushing that in a live setting.
That's really cool. I've always loved that
Yeah.
kind of improvised approach. You capture something unique in that moment, and it may never happen again. Exactly what happens in that space of time. I used to do a lot of open mic nights in Bristol back years ago, and it was always just a jam, and people would get up and join in on my song. Sometimes they just get up randomly and start playing.
Right.
I love that, just that kind of musicianship where you can just riff off each other and kind of try and feel the vibe and feel it out. And with how you have got this gig with Alice, is there any advice for up and coming, artists to kind of get their lucky break, or do you put it down to luck, or do you think the right people, or because this day and age is difficult, I think.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, see, I guess it is luck. I mean, I think it was, I mean, being yourself and being, putting in the time and doing the work and making my records and booking my tours and playing tiny shows in shitty bars, but playing those shows like you're at Madison Square Garden, like working really hard to like rehearse the show and add the theatrical elements and doing, putting on the clothes, designing the clothes myself and having them made, the makeup, and like going all the way, going in 100% and committing to it. I think that's why Grimy, he's seen me play these tiny shows, and that's why Grimy was like, no, this guy, like he's for real, and that's why they recommended me, I think. So yeah, I think it's, you have to really believe in yourself, and you have to go for it. You have to really put in the work.
Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, I don't think anything comes out of nothing. You got to really,
Yeah, I certainly wasn't sitting around waiting for Alice Cooper to call me. You know what I mean? And I'm still, I've got a European tour in October. I've got a bunch of touring right now. I'm working on my next record. This is not, this is just, it's a piece of what I do, but my whole identity is not tied into this. It's just something I was extremely honored to be able to be a part of, and I'm 100% there to be a part of whatever they want me to. I'm just honored to be invited into the room. And am happy to lend whatever I can to further the legacy of this band and contribute whatever they need. So
Perfect. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
really happy you got the job. You know, you've got the right mindset for it, and I think it's good. You do your own stuff. You know, you're obviously a really creative person. It's great. You know, rather than trying to mold you into just using you as a guitarist or something, and mold you to how the album needs to sound. You know, you've had your place to do what you feel, and I think that's what's going to shine. You know, and yeah, there's going to be a lot of people excited to hear it. I know that much.
yeah.
And with your own music, for anyone who hasn't yet heard any of your songs, is there one song or two songs that really, you know, for some people to check out first to get a real idea of what you're about?
Oh man. I mean, depends. You know, there's a lot there. I mean, I would say go listen to the records. You know, I just put out a new record, but I mean, you know, Baby Blue is a, you know, rock and roll track. Cheap High, straight rock and roll track. Tongue Tied, Lightning, um, Kiss Kiss. Kiss Kiss, I think, is the song supposedly that Bob sent Alice to get the gig. So
Wow,
yeah, check out Kiss Kiss.
definitely.
Some straight rock and roll music. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So but yeah, go listen to the record.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's really cool. Well, people have got a lot to check out. They got the new Alice album. They got your stuff to check out if they haven't heard it yet. And yeah, that's great. And did you mention which places you're going to play on your tour where people can see you playing?
Yeah, we're coming. Got some dates here. Well, Europe is October. We're gonna be in a lot in France, Brussels. We actually have our first shows in the UK this fall.
Awesome.
First time we're finally playing London and Brighton. I think Hope and Ruins and Lexington are the venues. I don't know if you're familiar with those.
Not sure. It's kind of the other way, Bristol.
Yeah. Oh, Bristol. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
far, yeah, we just have those. But yeah, Paris and Bordeaux and Amsterdam,
Yeah.
Germany. But on this tour in the US, we're next week starts in like Memphis, Jackson, Mississippi, and then we're coming through, I think Columbus, Ohio, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Chicago. I think we're working on a Detroit date.
Perfect.
We're also going to like North Carolina, Asheville and Charlotte, Charleston, South Carolina, Atlanta. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, a lot of places then.
yeah,
You
yeah.
see a lot
It's
of
I
places.
know we were like, yeah, at the start of this year, we're like, yeah, we just want to do, you know, a few dates, like, you know, keep it small, and then it's like it's kind of, you know, been, you know, we had like 10 dates, and then now it's like 20 dates, and then now we've got more dates, so it's growing, it's becoming, you know, but you know, it's not nothing too crazy. October will be kind of the like the big push where it's like all over Europe for the whole month.
Wow. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you'll have some fun, I'm sure. Yeah. And
Yeah, I love playing Europe.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
it's the best.
There's good audiences there. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Even with England, when I was living there, a lot of the places I've went for gigs, it's always just pretty crazy. The crowds are always, you know, quite, you know, passionate about music in England, I think, and where I am now, Mexico, they're probably more.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
even
yeah. I've
more.
heard. We haven't been
Yeah,
down there, but yeah. Spain, the audiences are amazing too.
yeah, yeah. No, it's really good. Where are you from originally? Where?
I'm from West Virginia.
Oh yeah, oh wow,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
that's
I'm
pretty
from
cool.
I grew up in a holler in West Virginia, which is, you know, yeah, like the heart of the Appalachian Mountains.
Oh wow, wow, really?
So I grew up, yeah, like off the grid.
That's sweet. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I've always liked the look of it up there, although I watched
Oh.
too many Wrong Turn films.
Right.
I don't know if I'd
Yeah.
ever go up there.
Yeah.
No, it
It
looks
is beautiful. It's
it's
beautiful.
beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love it. It's yeah, that's one of the places I've ever. In fact, I flew over there when I was coming into Mexico because one of the places when I was tracking where we were, it said Virginia, and I was looking out the plane window thinking, wow, that's
Yeah.
a lot of forest there, and it was just yeah, one big
Hmm.
yeah, no, that's
Yeah, a
really
lot for us. Yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah, it's, you know, culturally a bit challenging. It was challenging for me to grow up there, you know,
Was
but you know, just the, you know, small town,
mm,
you know, Southern American culture
yeah,
didn't really,
yeah.
you know, because my parent, I'm not, I'm first generation West Virginian, so,
Oh, well.
um, so you know, my parents were my dad's like from New York, you know, my
Yeah.
mom's from Ohio. But it's still, you know, I love growing up there, and it's a really beautiful place, and it kind of, was a really unique upbringing in that, I was introduced to all this old music and sort of was in my own little bubble, listening to the
yeah.
Rolling Stones and the Beatles and Led Zeppelin. So
Yeah, that must have been a real change, to where are you now, Nashville? So it must
yeah,
be quite a change. I guess sometimes those kind of places, you can kind of really get into something, if you're more remote, you can kind of really focus on, be it music or whatever you're into, it's a good place to, yeah. And
yeah.
were you quite keen to get out of there to kind of get your music out there? Was it quite
Oh yeah. I went out of high school. I went to Boston to the Berklee School of Music.
really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I went straight from the holler to Boston, and I lived there for 4 years. So that was a huge change,
Yeah,
but it was like, I was really determined to, get out of there and sort of reinvent myself and figure out who I was and figure out how to, make music and, do what I wanted to do. So
yeah, well, good for you. It's good.
yeah.
Good you managed to branch out. It's one of those places, small town kind of places you feel like you'll never get out and get
Yeah, and a lot of
with
them.
Alice Cooper. So
Right, yeah, no.
yeah, inspiration for anyone that.
Yeah, I mean, I was one of the few people that left, Yeah, most of the people I went to school with are still there. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess as a musician, you want to kind of get out there a bit more, but
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to, it's hard to be you know, I think it's just a hard place to kind of launch your career from West Virginia, It's just, it's tough. It's tough.
that's crazy.
But I try to go back there. My parents still live there, and it's a beautiful farm, so I try to go back there as much as I can.
Oh yeah, I would.
Yeah.
It does look beautiful right there. Of the whole Alice kind of experience, was there any moment that was kind of the most surreal for you? Was there anything?
I mean, I think just playing with them,
Yeah,
in like just all live together, and also doing that Yardbirds tune. It's like, we're, I mean, because I think Alice was good friends with Jeff Beck, and these guys. It's like playing that music with one of the guys, one of the originators, the one of the biggest rock bands in the world. I mean, it was it was definitely a pinch me moment of just feeling like all the hard work and my life of being in this music and writing and being inspired by it and being invited into that room and getting to participate was pretty surreal.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's the kind of confirmation really that any musician wants. I think it's a
Yeah,
difficult thing. I think sometimes you don't even know what you're doing as a musician. It's such a kind of organic thing that you don't always know if people are going to like it or whatever. You've got to just go with your heart and go with what you feel. And sometimes that kind
totally.
of confirmation is just, yeah,
Yeah,
you've kind of made it then, it's just nice.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm happy for you. I'm glad, glad you got that opportunity. It's, yeah, I just can't wait to hear the album. I'm one of the excited fans who are going to be blasting that
yeah.
when it comes out. Is it July? Did the album comes out or
July 25th, I believe.
25th? Perfect. Well,
Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. And yeah, it's been great chatting with you. Good to
likewise.
good to get to know you a bit more. And I hope everyone goes and checks out your songs now. And obviously,
Yeah,
when the album drops, yeah, grab that one. It'll be out
totally.
everywhere, I'm guessing.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously, yeah.
There's you can pre-order it now, I think, on Amazon,
That's
vinyl and all that.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. And are you doing any promo things with Alice or the band to promote it or anything?
I was just talking to Dennis yesterday, actually. I'm on tour in June in Asheville, North Carolina, and he's going to be there. So
Yeah.
we're right now we're setting up, I think, like a TV thing to kind of promote the record together.
Right.
Maybe might do an in-store, a
Yeah.
record store there. So that's kind of the only thing I have planned with them, in person at the moment. But we've got, there's other interviews in the works and things like that. So
Awesome.
yeah, I'm sure there'll be more coming down the line.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. Well, keep me in mind. I'm always happy to have you guys on. If you ever
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
on, yeah, I'll definitely
Right. Yeah.
definitely be happy to talk about this some more. Yeah, really exciting stuff. So yeah, thanks for your time, buddy. And yeah, I'll see you soon. And yeah, I look forward to chatting in the future. Thanks very
Yeah,
much.
man. Cool. Thanks
Cheers.
for having me. Cheers. Thanks, man.
Metal Matt, Alice Cooper here. Good name, by the way. I'll tell Rob that I talked to you. I know we got canceled at Comic-Con in London, but that'll come back up again. We'll do that. You're a singer-songwriter, and you know the best thing you can do during this crazy time right now is to write as much as you can. You know, writing is everything. All right, I will check out your YouTube, and I'm glad I'm your hero. And the best thing I can say to a guy like Metal Matt is, whatever you do, don't rust.